Hey fam, welcome or welcome back. Teacher here, back for another chapter reading of section 132, A Child Bride Forced into Polygamy by Helger Zeiner. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into the next chapter, which is chapter 19. It was only noon, and Richard briefly contemplated driving down to his Camp Loops office, but decided against it. Everything concerning this project had come to a grinding halt until he could persuade Jake to sell him the few acres in question. What could he and Daisy possibly do in the office that was productive and constructive? Absolutely nothing. They just had to meet with this obnoxious bastard again and make him sign those damn papers. Hoping to hear from him, but fearing that he was simply stringing them along, didn't really lower their stress level. The empty afternoon loomed ahead of them like an unconquerable mountain. Daisy suggested having lunch at the Blue River Resort and then going for a walk along the resort's private lakeshore that led to the banks of the Thompson River. They should hold back booking a room until they were sure that Jake agreed to see them tomorrow. As both of them had little appetite, they opted for a simple soup and salad combination before they started their walk. Up to this moment, Richard had believed he knew his assistant quite well, although he had never met with Daisy outside of their office environment. She surprised him with her energetic stride. He had not expected her to be so athletic. After a while, they fell into a comfortable pace and marched on, probably thinking along the same lines. What will we do if Jake doesn't give in to our request? He has to. Daisy started out of the blue. It's only a matter of money. Everything has a price, he agreed. Well, actually, not everything. But in this case, it's correct. He is out to maximize his gain. Her comment irritated him. Of course, everything can be bought. No, it can't. Like, for example, you cannot pay me enough to trade places with that poor, exhausted woman he said is his wife. That is not a proper example. Why not? She asked. Because I didn't mean to put a price tag on human beings. Some people don't have a venal disposition like you. You can't be bought. We all know that. So, in effect, I can't trade you. I was talking about things meaning objects like cars and jewelry, paintings, things with material value, or land. Oh, that. Sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, we leave human resources out of it. Some people can't be bought. I agree on this. But there is a gray area in between the human and the material factor where it is very difficult to come to a financial agreement. He really could not imagine what she meant. After a while of contemplation, she continued, for example, somebody owns an object that represents a certain spiritual or emotional value. Take the bracelet of a woman given to her by her beloved husband. He can buy her another one. He is deceased. Trust me. There would be a price for it. Maybe exorbitant, but nevertheless, if the offer is high enough to guarantee her a lifestyle she could never otherwise afford, she would eventually part with the silly trinket. She is already 80 years old. Oh, Daisy, leave me alone. You win. Daisy stopped walking and looked at him. Good, because I want you to realize that we may have a difficult nut to crack. Jake may only hold out for more money, but he may have other reasons for rejecting our offer, like that old woman. He may not be interested in changing his lifestyle. Money may not mean anything to him. We need to be prepared. She started to walk again. Although I can't afford the life Although I can't for the life of me imagine what objections he could have against us buying this land from him. Well, one of them might be that you're going to have more people out there because he's so against all worldly things. I would think that he would have a problem with you developing land and building up more homes and things, which then in turn would create more people, which might give his wives a place to run if they ever do try to get off of that thing. But then again, they can't, because when they do try to run, what happens is like what happened to Catherine's daughter, where they unfortunately are unalived. Mm. He remembered Jake's expression when inquiring about the price he was willing to pay. Pure, barely concealed greed. I'm confident that he is open for another offer as long as he doesn't know our plans. That would piss him off to no end. A high class country development right next to his property, bringing the evil temptations of modern life right to his doorstep. Wow, he would go berserk if he knew that. But he doesn't, so why should he refuse? I may just have to shell out more than I was hoping for. Daisy nodded, but her mouth was shaped like the fat lips of a carp while she muttered, hmm, hmm. Come on, make me feel good, Richard pleaded. Tell me it will work. At 4 o'clock, they were back in the lobby having coffee. Richard's legs were heavy from walking over 3 hours at a good pace. Even Daisy admitted that her feet hurt, but she said it was only because she did not wear the right shoes. To kill time, he finally got around to asking her about Bountiful. What about it? She said. You have mentioned it twice already and said you'd tell me more when there's time. We've got plenty of that just now. What's the point? You're not going to believe me anyway. He promised her he would, and she launched right away into a story that sounded so absurd that he forgot his promise on the spot. He did not believe a word she was saying. In fact, he started to doubt her judgment altogether, wondering why he had never detected the slightest trace of irrationality in her. What was suddenly wrong with her? Daisy liked some wine with her meals, but that did not make her a heavy drinker. Doing drugs was out of the question. Had she started to take medication that did not agree with her? Was she distressed, mentally unbalanced, or temporarily deranged over a personal predicament he was not aware of? She could not seriously expect him to swallow her absolutely ludicrous description of a village with a fancy name like Bountiful, right at the Canadian border to America, that could not be found on any map for British Columbia, at least not under this name. But he had existed, but that had existed since the mid 40s, run by an excommunicated bishop of the Mormon church called Winston Blackmore. It was, according to Daisy's amazing tale, a bastion of polygamy where a bunch of fundamentalist Mormons exchange underage child brides with their equally inclined counterparts south of the Canadian border. See, if he's the type of person who's going to have to see it to believe it. He's the type of person who's going to have to see people, little ones like Martha, and hear him say that that's his wife in order to believe it. But because of how they are and because they're so secretive, I wonder if he would even let them know that that was a wife, because none of the other wives came out. He just introduced them to the one, right? So who's to say? All this not only tolerated, but in part financed by the liberal laws of civilized Western society in the name of religious freedom. Really? He was snickering. Government sanctioned pedophilia. Ooh, I hope I don't get strict for that. We'll see. Male and female children apparently raised in total ignorance until they were old enough to work for the church elders. Slaves, an oppression system, bred for the purpose of making their superiors rich and comfortable. Young boys pressed into forced labor as soon as they were able to walk, carry, and lift. Young girls doing household chores until they menstruated the first time and could be allocated to a fine standing member of the church as sex objects and breeding machines. Sick stuff like that happens in the world, sure, but not in Canada. It happens all over the world. No one country is exempt. It was just too far fetched to believe. Daisy was making it up to get back at his laissez faire attitude toward his freaky neighbor, Jake. She was just testing his macho level of tolerance. Very well. Two could play at this game. Stories like that go around the internet all the time, but that doesn't mean they are true. I can't believe you fall for such cheap sensationalism. If this Bountiful really existed, the authorities would have clammed down on it like a flesh-eating plant on a passing fly. That's what you would think, but no, they let them get away with it. Its real name is Leicester, Lister, and it is close to Creston in the southeastern corner of the Kootenays, Kootenays, at a dead end road. If you were to go there, somebody stops you at gunpoint, forcing you to turn back, just like it happened to me up here yesterday. And the authorities, meaning our government, are well aware of some of the criminal activities going on there, like trafficking young girls between America and Canada. Mm, 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 mm. It has tried to interfere several times, but every single attorney general has failed to prosecute anybody involved in those cases. And why would that be? He asked her, smirking like a lawyer who had ripped a hole in the opponent's defense. If justice itself failed that miserably, our whole country would be in a sorry state. The law does not allow polygamy in Canada. No, no, no. It's all crap. All those stories about fundamentalist sex in Canada. So, what did you think all those 10 huts were for? See, this is what I'm talking about. Richard is on my nerves. American, okay, all those stories about fundamentalist sex in Canada, America, and Mexico you mentioned yesterday, that's all bull, including that bountiful rubbish. It's all invented by some sick minds. Daisy was not impressed by his display of outrage. She carried on without reminding him of his promise to believe her. Bigamy can easily be defended and is clearly against the law, but polygamy operates in a legal gray zone. How do you prove it? The law cannot barge into a bountiful and arrest the guys because they have multiple wives. Don't even ask why not. Every male in charge there is legally married only to one, his first wife, and all the others are bound to him by a religious ceremony. There must be a law against that. Oh, there is, but there is also a law for it. It's called constitutional right to follow one's own religious belief. As long as there is no proof of coercion or restraint, what is wrong with consenting adults sharing their lives together? Do you plan to arrest every single adult who chooses to live in a commune? What is wrong with several women or men living together under one roof? Nothing at all, he had to agree. But what about the young girls? If the stories were true, surely they would not pick such a lifestyle willingly. No, I don't think so. But you have to find one first willing to give evidence against their torturement. So far, no luck. See, those girls have been brainwashed since birth. They are insecure, uneducated, and scared. They wouldn't know how to escape and where to turn if they did succeed. This conversation was going nowhere. For a while, it had helped distract him, but now Richard was losing interest and started to be fidgety again. The problems of this world were not really his concern. Of course not. Why would they be? After all, he had his own quiet, considerable difficulties to solve and told Daisy so. She took it good naturedly. At least it is already 5 o'clock, and I think you can call him now. Was 5 not a bit too early? Would Jake sense and take advantage of his display of urgency? They contemplated the time aspect for another half an hour. Then he gave in and dialed Jake's number. He answered right away, as if he had been waiting by the phone, sounding exceptionally cheerful. Sure, he would see him tomorrow. 10 o'clock would be fine, if that suited Richard. And one more thing. He thought it was best to come alone, to leave the fiancée at home. No need to bring her along when grown men met meet to discuss important matters, Jake said. See? Mm, 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 mm. Dinner was quite a different affair from the hurried breakfast they had had that morning. It was served in the same large resort dining room, but now the tables were decked with starched pink tablecloths and decorated with silver candlesticks and fresh flower arrangements. Soft background music floated from hidden speakers, absorbing the already muffled steps of the well trained waiters. All sliding doors to the patio were open, but protected with mosquito screens to let the warm August air in without subjecting the dinnered guests to the armada of little bugs that rose from the sprinkled lawns outside every evening. Daisy had suggested going to one of the less expensive restaurants in town, But Richard had insisted on splurging this evening. "You gonna need your money, honey. What you splurging for? Because that man's about to hit you in the pocket." He felt like celebrating already. Jake had caved in, he could feel it. The greedy bastard was eager to get his grubby fingers on his money. In hindsight, Richard suspected Jake had been willing to entertain his offer this morning, but had not been able to show his willingness because of Daisy's presence. When he mentioned this to Daisy, she reacted rather smugly, telling him it only proved her point that what a macho pig this guy really was. Richard dropped the subject. Then, as he did not want to risk a major argument with her about seeing Jake on his own, they chose steak and salad for dinner, and he ordered a bottle of red wine he thought was of mediocre quality and a superior price until he tasted it. Liquid velvet, worthy of every penny. It made him more mellow than he had felt in months. He made a mental note to order a case of this particular label and vintage as soon as his bank account had recovered from its recent nosedive. Daisy took the helicopter back to Camp Loops first thing in the morning. There was no point in her wasting any more of her time hanging around until midday. Richard felt so confident that he would come to an agreement with Jake that they had decided over dessert last night she should brief Nigel, the surveyor, right away and start preparing a new submission to their AO. It would still take at least a week for the new plans to be drawn up and even longer for the unnecessary surveying to be done. The sky was overcast with billowing clouds on the horizon. A summer storm was forecasted for that evening. Richard was confident he would be back in the office by then, with the ink dry on the most important document of his career. He was whistling along with a happy tune on the local radio station while driving the same route as yesterday. In his mind, he was rehearsing the arguments he would bring forward and did some calculations to see how far he could go without having to rob the bank. When he reached Jake's property, the same young fellow waited for him at the gate, and he followed him again. This time, his guide stopped at the place Richard had secretly labeled the Plaza of Huts on the day before. Jake was standing in front of one of the rundown huts and beckoned him to come closer. Otherwise, the place was deserted. Not even a chicken was in sight. Richard parked his car, got out, went over to Jake. Up close, the hut looked even more desolate. I just lost my place. Even more desolate than he had expected. Jake greeted him warmly, shook his hand, and extended one arm in what he probably thought was a grand gesture. Richard feared Jake would place his heavy paw on his shoulder again, so he quickly moved a step back. But Jake attempted nothing of the kind. In fact, he actually pointed towards the entrance of the ramshackle structure. Next to the makeshift wooden barn door was a small opening with shutters. Without glass, this window would hardly offer protection on a bitter cold winter nights. It must be dark and damp inside. A young woman appeared in the doorframe, briefly blinking before her eyes and adjusted to the bright daylight. She was tall and skinny, no more than 20 at most, and she carried a toddler on her arm. Jake beamed. "This is Emma and Jake Jr." Richard froze. "Jake Jr.? What stupid game is he playing? Does he want to shock me by introducing his extended family to me now that Daisy is not by my side? So he can watch my reaction and if I don't have myself under control, bully me into a higher price because my reaction could be interpreted as insulting? Is he so sure of my moral integrity that he expects me to react outrage? If Jake is out to confuse and shock or embarrass me before we get down to business, he has a surprise coming. See, Richard, you still being dumb because this isn't about him shocking you. This is about him showing you the very thing that Daisy was talking about. But your narrow mindedness won't even allow you to see that she wasn't making this crap up. This is what really happens. Let's continue. Richard's mind raced through all those thoughts, concluding that Jake's tactics were a little too obvious to be effective with a smooth operator like him. But he could still hear Daisy's warnings not to underestimate Jake. "Don't let him steamroll you." He cautioned himself, "Stay on top of it." "Well, it's nice to meet your wife," he responded casually to Jake's bait, who opened his eyes in amazement and stared at him. "Hello, Emma." Richard extended his hand to her, but she lowered her eyes and did not take it. Maybe he was wrong, and she was not Jake's wife after all. Maybe he had embarrassed her, and paranoid as he was, had stumbled into this like a fool. No, I don't think you're allowed to touch her because she is a woman and you are a man. They can't even look at their older sons like that. So what makes you think that they can talk to you? Yeah, anyways, he doesn't, like I said, he don't know. Um, Maybe he embarrassed her, and paranoid as he was, had stumbled into this one like a fool. To admit a mistake at this stage would be even more embarrassing. So he added boldly, "And little Jake, what a cute little fellow. You are a lucky man, Jake." "I sure am," Jake muttered, "with my children and with my wives." So Daisy was right. There was more than one. Then Jake broke into laughter, immediately shared by Richard to hide his shock at Jake's sudden revelation, but not by the guy standing next to him who had been his guide. For a split second, Richard had assumed the attractive young man might be Emma's husband. The way he looked at her would warrant such a thought. He had hungry eyes. Despite his obvious look in his obvious youth and good looks, he seemed worn out and desperate. "Let me introduce you to my other son, Jake the First." "How many Jakes are there?" Jake said, "Stay cool." There was no way Jake would trick him into a reaction that might hurt his negotiations. "Your firstborn. Nice to meet you, Jake." Jake the firstborn and Richard shook hands too. Then his father put his arm over the young boy's shoulder who stood next to Emma and said, "Well, Richard, just bear with me for a second. I have to instruct my son on the daily chores, and then we can drive up to the main house." "Sure, I'll wait in my car." Richard went back to his car and settled in the driver's seat. The windshield was dusty from the long drive on the gravel road, but this gave him the advantage of being able to study the small group of people in a relative safe space. Jake, the father, was the only one talking. Jake, the firstborn, took the notebook out of his shirt pocket. He was nodding and writing ferociously. Emma stood passively by her. "Well," he suggested. Her husband was the correct term, sighed, rubbing Jake's back with one hand. She was not very pretty, but much better looking than Marion, much younger too. Her brown hair was pulled back in the same curious upturned wave that ended in a tight bun on the back of her head, just like Marion had worn her hair. And her pale colored dress was old fashioned and ridiculously long and bulky. Both women appeared to work hard on looking as unattractive as possible to any other male in their vicinity. So why did Jake's firstborn look so hungry? Ooh. Were plain Emma and haggard Marion the only women here his lusty eyes could feast on? The notes the young the younger son made must be a shopping list because now Jake turned to his wife and she said single words that his son wrote down. Would he be the one to go to the supermarket in Blue River and not Emma or Marion or both of them? A disturbing thought crossed Richard's mind where the women were not allowed to leave the property, not even go to the supermarket. Before he could ponder such a ridiculous notion, Jake stroked his baby son's head and headed towards Richard's car. He slid into the passenger seat and, without asking if Richard would mind giving him a lift, ordered, "Let's go." Richard started to drive up the main house without making any further reference to Jake's strange family arrangements. He wouldn't give him the satisfaction. They sat at the long dining table, having coffee like last time, but Jake had visibly changed since Richard's first visit. He was no longer the jovial, harmless, and obliging, casually chatting while bringing coffee from the kitchen guy. This time, Marion was present and she served them quietly, with not much as a thank you from him. Richard could not help but compare her to Emma. She was considerably older, moving with deliberate caution like somebody who is sick or injured or just plain tired. She looked even worse than yesterday when she had joined her husband. Yes, in her case, it must be correct. She was the senior to Emma and therefore surely the legal spouse to greet his guest. As if he could read his mind, Jake started to explain. "Of course, Marion is my wife in the eyes of the Canadian law. She was my first wife and will always be first. Richard glanced at Marion, who finished settling the table, wondering briefly how she felt. Having her husband's lover living on the same property, acknowledging her in front of a complete stranger must have felt weird. If she tolerated this behavior from her husband, she must be um okay with it. What happened here seemed to be a classic S&M scenario to him, with Jake the sadistic master and Marion and Emma the willing sufferers. You don't seem surprised that I have more than one wife. Jake was either determined to make Richard lose his control or frustrated over his nonchalance. Oh, well, there has been some talk in the resort where Daisy and I were staying. The Blue River Resort, yes. And what's the talk about? None of my concern. I would not be so sure about it if nothing else satisfied my curiosity. I don't really listen to gossip, but if you must know, the waiter told me and Daisy that you are an American and that you are living here in some kind of commune. A commune or a cult? I shrugged my shoulders. Who cares? I do. You see, Richard, there's a huge difference. A commune is a loose union of immoral people sharing intimacy without rules of proper conduct. A cult is a system of religious worship devoted to a principle practiced by faithful followers. Why did he appear to be so desperate for Richard's approval? Well, if that's what it's after, he could have had it. Thank you for explaining this to me. I am originally from Germany, where we are more experienced in the system of communes, free love for all you know, not so much in cults. But I get it now. You are the leader of a cult, living your life the way you want to, and that is fine with me. I guess it has its advantages to have more than one wife. Jake leaned back and folded his arms above his sizable stomach, grinning, enjoying himself. Marion. The woman had just gone back to the kitchen. The woman had just gone back to the kitchen and popped her head back through the door the second he was yelling for her. Marion, come and explain to our guest the principle of celestial marriage. She looked astounded, but returned to the table immediately and started to recite like a wound up doll. If a man espouses a virgin and desires to espouse another and another, and they are all virgins and have been vowed to no other man, then he is justified. He cannot commit adultery, for they are given to him by the Lord, and they belong to him. Wow, this was getting a bit too heavy. Richard had not come here for a lecture on their twisted beliefs. Excuse me. He stared at Marion immediately went quiet. He started and Marion immediately went quiet. I just realized that the signal is really, really low. I hope y'all heard all of that. I'd rather you don't go into details. As soon as he said it, he realized his mistake. Jake had finally called his bluff. Pleased with himself, Jake raised his eyebrows and changed the subject. All right, then. If your spiritual well being is of no importance to you, let us discuss the ulterior subject on your mind. Marion, leave us alone. She rushed away like a dog that is let off the leash. You want to know if I will agree to sell you 3 acres you desperately need for your development. Damn it, he knew. Richard swallowed hard and collected his thoughts, but Jake did not wait for his reply. Relax. Although I am somewhat disappointed in your deception, Richard, I understand that you felt your need for trickery. You do not know us and you do not understand us. Your values are goal oriented in this life only, and you do not consider the afterlife. I will help you achieve your goals because I trust in your ability to eventually look beyond the obvious and seek the truth as the good Lord laid down in his doctrine and covenants. I am sorry, Richard stumbled. I did not know. Of course not. Jake proceeded to tell him that he had attended the public hearing on his planned subdivision held last winter in the community hall of Blue River. Richard had automatically assumed that Jake had no knowledge of his plans because he was nothing but a backward farmer. Involuntarily, he turned his head, and there it was, a radio. He had not noticed it before. Jake taunted him. Did you think I don't follow what is going on in the world? Do you think I don't read books or newspapers? So he's allowed to do these things, but the wives and children aren't. Got it. Do you think I don't listen to the radio, check the internet, or watch television? Yes, television. We do have satellite reception here, in case you are wondering. For television and for the internet, do you think I'm stupid? That's exactly what Richard had thought. He had considered Jake ignorant and uninformed, but the way Jake was talking now was no longer the language of an uneducated man, which is what Daisy tried to tell him. Daisy tried to let him know that this man was playing him, but he didn't listen. So now Richard is going to find out he can't play with this man. Richard's anger rose again, but this time directed entirely at himself, at his amazing and inexcusable stupidity. But Jake had indicated he would help him, despite his arrogant assumptions. You said you would help me. Yeah, he's gonna help you. He gonna get a nice, good little penny off you. You see how poor his family is. That man's about to ask for some money. I said $5,000 per acre. He's going to ask for more than that. Yes, I will sell the land to you, but there is one condition attached to it. Instant relief flooded through Richard, washing away his anger. Sure, what can I do for you? Jake shook his head, making a disapproving hissing sound, with his tongue protruding snake like from his fleshy lips. This is nothing you should do for me. It's something you should do for yourself. Richard gave up playing games and told Jake whatever he wanted would be done. When Jake informed him that all he wanted was that Richard would visit again to spend some time with him and his family, Richard guessed immediately that he was meant to attend some of Jake's brainwashing lectures. He relaxed and agreed. No problem at all. Promises of this nature were not legally binding, and he might even attend one or two before he would let them fizzle out. It all depended on his schedule, which would be very demanding as soon as this sale agreement was reached. But this was something he did not have to mention now. There was one thing left to discuss, the price. And did you think about my offer? Jake said he did. He told Richard that 500 would not be quite enough, considering that he risked his privacy of his until now secluded estate, which was very dear and valuable to him. So, what price have you thought about? 10,000. Holy, barely holding back a very unholy profanity. Richard tried hard to stay civil, but that's unheard of. 10,000 for 3 acres? Jake, please, you can't be serious. You didn't understand me. It's 10,000 for each acre, and I am very serious. See? I said that it was going to be 5. I was wrong. It's 10. My signal's going out again. I hope you all can hear me. Let me know what you thought of this chapter reading and if you think that Richard is going to be able to talk Jake down or not. That way I'll know if you made it to the end. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, peace.